Hello, this is Cris Duncan here with the Arcanum and Find Your Focus Photographic Education. And today I want to address a art and science question of lighting, a principle that has been posed to me in my cohort on the Arcanum. And one of my apprentices is looking at different types of lighting and had some questions on maybe what he should buy, what kind of modifiers, umbrellas, softboxes, speed lights versus strobes, and so on and so forth. Well, I can't specifically answer that to one particular person. It really comes down to what do you want to photograph? What kind of imagery do you want to do? Is color really important? Is light quality the most important thing? Is it going to be something you have to change out a lot or something you're going to set up and leave? So these are some questions you have to answer. But I want to go over some things that light's going to do that you need to understand what light will do in any circumstance. So then you can decide what modifier you need, what light source you need to fit that particular image. Because we're governed by physics and we're governed by science when it comes to lighting. So I'm going to start with a principle here, and I've got a little presentation show. It won't take very long, and we'll go through this. So I think the first thing we really need to understand is we have three things of light we need to consider before we do any type of photography. We have these things to look at. We have light quantity. How much of light do we need? Is there enough? How much do we need to make it work, right? So how much light is there? Light quality, and this is what we're really going to focus on today, is light quality. Light quality, is the light hard or is the light soft? Does it evoke the right emotion? You know, how does the quality of light fit your image? And then finally, we're looking at light direction. And is it flat? Does it give us shape, form, and texture? And all these are questions we need to ask before we really start any type of image to make sure it's the most powerful image we can create for our client or for our end viewer. So the first thing I want to talk about is this principle, that size matters. When it comes to lighting, size matters. Size is very, very important. And here's the scientific or the physical law of the light of the size. The size of the source relative to the distance from the subject is directly related to the shadow edge detail. As the size of the source increases, the shadows soften and the highlights or the specularity diminish. Basically, what we're saying in this is the bigger the light source, the softer the light quality. The bigger the light source and the closer it is to your subject, the softer the light quality. We can look at the sun. It's a very large light source, but it's very, very far away, so it appears to be a small light source. Okay. But when we're working in the studio or working with a client, and we're doing any type of speed light or strobes, whatever, we're thinking of the larger the source and the closer it is to our subject, the softer the light will be. And this doesn't mean shadow density. I'm not talking about how deep the shadows are, how dark the shadows are, how dense they are. It's not a lighting ratio. It's the transfer from highlight to shadow. We call that the shadow edge detail. Okay. So let's look at this. This would be a small source. This is a studio strobe with a 7-inch parabolic. It's going to give you a very hard edge light. Shadows can be soft. Shadows can be dense or shadows cannot be dense. Like I said, this isn't the ratio. It's the quality of light. The edge between the shadow to the highlight will be very sharp or hard. And a soft box, like this 4x6 soft box, this will give us a very soft transition from highlight to shadow. Window light would be a large source. A speed light would be a small source. So let's look at this example. I've set up this balloon in my studio. I have that 7-inch parabolic that we saw in that other frame. I have that 6 feet away from my subject, pointed down at 45 degrees. You can see that the specularity is very hard. There's a very pinpoint piece of light there. That's a reflection. That's what a highlight is. It's a reflection of the light source. And you can see that our shadow edge detail from highlight to shadow is very, very crisp. That is a hard light. It's caused by a small source. In this next image, I did not move my light source, but I took off the 7-inch parabolic and put on that 4x6 softbox. It is still 6 feet away. You can see there that the specularity did diminish. It evened out. It got softer, and our shadow edge got softer. This is clearly evident as that balloon, the shadow of the balloon hits that surface that it's sitting on. Then I took that same 4x6 softbox and moved it very close to my subject, to this balloon. You can see how that specular highlight is now very, very soft and covers much more of the balloon, and the shadow transfer is almost non-existent. That's because of this law, how big the source is and how close it is to our subject. So what's a practical application for this? Well, if I'm photographing this family of 7 here, a larger source or a soft light quality is more likely preferred. We don't want hard-edged shadows giving us a lot of different contrast and ratio on people's faces. That might confuse the viewer. We want to keep the viewer right in on that family. They want to put this in their home. They need to have an image that shows everybody's face equally. They're all equally represented in light and light quality. So a large source is what I needed to fulfill this job. Contrast that to the image on the right of this beautiful bride, where her dress was very expensive, has all this detailing, and it's obviously white. Well, I need to show detailing on a white dress, and the only way to do that is with a shadow. So I needed a smaller source to put more shadow on the dress, therefore showing more shape, form, and texture and detail. So we got into about our light direction we talked about earlier. So a small source was appropriate for that. So if you're needing to mimic sunlight for maybe a commercial project, as these 2 images indicate, I need a small light source. Both of these were shot in studio with studio strobes and small light sources. Image on the top left, I had to do some psychology in this and thinking about this. Okay, I'm selling a steak knife with a college logo on it. Who's going to buy this? What's the end user? Well, the end user is typically a male. A female may buy it for her boyfriend or her husband or her son or whatever, but more than likely the end user of this will be a male. Where do males typically cook? Outside. What are they typically cooking? They're grilling. You grill outside. What is the light like outside? But it's hard sunlight. So I used a small source to replicate a sunlight look, even though we're in the studio. Same with the bottom right image. This is for a manufacturer of window coverings. They wanted to show how the morning or midday sun or whatever would come through and light up this beautiful home. So I have a studio strobe outside with a very small modifier on it to create a sunlight look coming through those windows. This is another image of a senior in his car. He was in complete shade. The building behind him was in full sun. Well, it didn't make sense for him to have soft light and everything else to have hard light. That's a dichotomy that I did not want in my image. I wanted to make believable. But I could not place him in the full sun, therefore he could not keep his eyes open, and it would not be a pleasing expression. So, knowing that I needed to mimic the sunlight, I needed a small source. So therefore I used a small source and put it in the direction the sun was coming in to make it look like this whole scene is being lit by one source, in that case, which is the sun, although that is not the case. Now you look at these images. These images called for softer light, therefore I needed a larger light source. Think of our balloon and that hard specularity we had on that balloon a few slides ago. That would not be appropriate for these wine bottles or this chiller unit in this restaurant. I needed a large light source to have subtle contrast and very soft lighting. Same with the image on the right. These vinyl bags and backpacks creating hard shadows on my client, they all need to be kind of equally represented. So to allow for more subtle contrast, I needed a large source. And in this image, I needed the large source very close to make that highlight to shadow transfer almost non-existent, while still maintaining a little bit of light direction. Reflective objects. Typically, reflective objects are going to need a larger source, a huge source, because they're going to reflect everything around it. And remember, our highlight is just a reflection of our light source. So to get all these nice reflections in these chrome golf clubs, I needed several large sources surrounding these subjects to create a nice, soft, specular highlight on each one of these chrome golf clubs. A family enjoying time in their room. Wanted to mimic window light for this. I thought this scene called for nice, soft lighting. The white bedding, the subtle neutral tones in this room, their outfits, it all, to me, fits with soft lighting. This image would be completely different if we had used a small light source, say a speed light, portable speed light. So I needed to use a very large source. Just so for your reference, this was a 7-foot umbrella placed just outside a camera frame. Some more reflective objects. Large source. And here when we get into some families and some seniors or individuals, it's kind of our choice as an artist, what's going to fit the scene. Something more edgy and fashion, Hollywood type lighting, typically that's a harder source like you see on the left. A family, usually you need a larger source for that. To make sure the scene fits. Make sure your lighting fits the overall scene and the feel of the image. So it's not one size fits all. It does take some forethought. This is supposed to be for a country club offering their Christmas banquet hall that you can reserve for your parties. They want to have a warm, cozy, elegant atmosphere. To me, a large source is what was needed for that to create these subtle contrast, this nice soft lighting in there. And say it again, to create soft light, I need larger light sources. So I know we ran through that really quick, but I'll just give you an understanding of what I'm talking about when we're getting to light quality. I think this is the #1 key every photographer should understand once they get past exposure. Exposure has got to be the first thing you learn, because you got to get a proper exposure. If you don't get proper exposure, it's like having the best ingredients to make a meal and then you overcook it. Okay, but once we're past exposure, we can get a proper exposure. We have to start adding light and these other ingredients into our images. I think size matters and light quality is huge, because that's going to evoke emotion, that's going to show texture, or it's going to hide texture. It's going to help establish a key, whether it be high key or low key. And so it's up to us as artists and as creatives to make the proper decision, not that one is better than the other, but one fits a perfect scene better than another one might fit that scene. So once again, this is Cris Duncan. I'm a master on the Arcanum, and I'm with Find Your Focus Photographic Education. And today we're talking about that size matters and understanding how the size of your light source affects your light quality. We're going to be doing more videos in this series talking about our position and our placement and some other things to help you understand the art and science of lighting a little better. So next time you go out on a photo shoot, you can properly execute the image that your clients need, that you want, and to help you and to help those viewers be more attracted to your images and set yourself just one step higher above everyone else. Thanks for joining today.